Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today to this webinar, Rising from the Ashes, Breaking the Burnout Cycle for Greater Satisfaction, Vitality and Meaning at Work. My name's Carly Hanson and I'm one of the Sector Sustainability Coordinators here at Community Legal Centres Queensland. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're holding today's webinar. In Brisbane, they are the Turrbal and the Yagara people. We wish to pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that these are stolen lands and that sovereignty was never ceded. As this webinar is being viewed by people throughout Queensland and Australia, we also pay respect to the traditional owners throughout the country and extend a very warm welcome to any First Nations people joining us today. So today I'm really pleased to welcome Dr. Mendy Naralik, a clinical psychologist, to present today's session. She'll be talking to us about how working in a CLC can lead to, while incredibly rewarding, it can lead to negative personal impacts, such as compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma and burnout. These impacts have likely been exacerbated by COVID-19 for many people as well. So today's webinar will hopefully help you understand and recognise instances and patterns of burnout that can come from working in high stress settings with vulnerable and traumatised populations. Dr. Naralik will focus on integrating pragmatic and holistic practices that encourage new ways of being at work that lower the risk of burnout, build resilience and connection, and improve satisfaction and well-being. And today's webinar is part of the CLCQ Mental Health and Wellbeing CPD program, which has been developed to assist frontline CLC workers to manage the impacts of COVID-19 and supported by a grant from the Queensland Community Foundation. So please do keep an eye out for future webinars and face-to-face sessions in this series over the coming months. So I'll hand over to Dr. Mendy Naralik in just a moment, and she can tell you a little bit more about herself when I do that. But just firstly, some quick housekeeping. So today's webinar is being recorded and we'll have the recording available for you to download later today or tomorrow. The PowerPoints and other materials have been emailed out to everyone who registered and are also available to download from our website and from the handout section on the GoToWebinar control panel. We, of course, encourage you to ask questions, so simply type your question into the question box on the control panel and we'll read that one out for you at the end. We will hold the questions until the end of the presentation as there's quite a bit of content to get through, but feel free to type them in as you think of them. We've also got a poll today, so make sure you do participate in that poll when it comes up on the screen. And without further ado, I'll be able to hand over now to Dr. Mendy. Thank you, Mendy. I'll take it away.
Thanks, Carly. Just a little techie thing. Sorry, Carly. I've got these windows still up about starting a broadcast. Do I click on that or can I?
Oh, yes, you can press that if it's in the way. Yeah, for sure.
It is a little in the way. No there we go. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, and I can move that window. Perfect. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. It was really just spot on in terms of what I'm going to be touching on today. And thanks again for inviting me to speak with you all on this topic that I'm betting many of you, myself included, have some direct experience with. And while it can be a bit of a heavy topic, I'm hoping that by the end you're not going to feel it as quite so heavy and contact a sense of agency and clarity about what it is, and that there is some capacity for you to move through it. So there's a sense of hopefulness and inspiration, even perhaps. Can I talk about inspiration to sort of feel like we can be inspired perhaps by, you know, the sort of work we do and even experiencing some of these states of burnout, compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. Hopefully that'll make sense to you by the end. But oops, hang on, clicking the wrong thing here. So a little bit about me. I'm not going to dwell too much on that. I have spoken before, but I really like to kind of integrate a lot of modalities within my practice. I'm in private practice, also run groups as well. And this is really about making unconscious material within ourselves conscious. I really like to build self-awareness, and depth. And this is for the purpose of really healing and transforming ourselves. I like to kind of contact deeper aspects of self. So I talk about contacting soul, and really operating from a place of deep self or soul rather than small self and ego. So I'll use some of those terms throughout, but it'll hopefully make sense within the very pragmatic and informative information I'm going to be sharing with you again. So I'm going to start with this quote by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she talks about burnout here as there's a burning that goes with joy and there's a burning that goes with annihilation. One is the fire of transformation and the other is the fire of decimation only. So, you know, the word burnout can be really symbolic that something is coming to an end, but it doesn't have to be a devastation. Okay, if we are conscious and aware of the signs and the risk factors and the influences on what's sort of creating this fire, say, it can become a really transformative experience and one of growth and renewal. And that's really what I want to emphasize today. And if we go through these moments or these states and move through them with grace and consciousness, it can really change our lives and have an impact on the people around us, the people that we work with and the people that we spend our time with. Okay, so like Carly said, we've got a little bit of content to get through today. So I want to first talk about what these terms are: compassion fatigue, burnout, vicarious trauma, and I think they're used a little interchangeably. So I'm just going to pull them apart a little bit. And then we're going to look at some of the things that are influencing the experiences of compassion fatigue, burnout, and vicarious trauma from outside of us, so the systemic factors. And I want to spend most of the time today really looking at how we can move through that. So I'm going to talk about self-awareness really briefly, because I've touched on it quite a bit before in other webinars, but then developing a self-care plan, changing how we think about our work and burnout, and making meaning at work, and then so bigger than self goals or values. So this is about making meaning, sorry. And then talk about vicarious resilience and growth, that actually it's because of the experiences that we have, we can actually experience that transformation. We can actually build strength and resilience and courage, and post-traumatic growth can happen when we're in challenging situations, like I know that many of you are with your clients and your work. So I would like to start with a little visualization practice to help ground and center us. So it's hopefully going to help us take in the material in a way that may not feel too overwhelming. Because the material can get a little heavy, I just want to acknowledge and flag perhaps that some of you may get a little overwhelmed by listening to some of the material. So I just want to please ask you all, if you're feeling that way, to take care of yourselves, listen to your own needs, and do whatever you need to make yourself okay. But I'm hoping that this kind of little practice will help set us up to receive the material in a way that's really open and curious and from a steady place. So, because I can't see you all, this is always sometimes a little bit strange to do this kind of practice when I'm not getting some feedback from everybody. But this will only take maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And so all you need to do now is, if you've got pens or paper in your hand, I would just suggest you put those down and get comfortable in your seat wherever you are. Maybe put your arms in your lap and make sure your feet are comfortable on the floor. If you're sitting on the floor, you can just get to a comfortable position there. Take some time maybe to lean back or roll your shoulders around, roll your neck around a little bit, and just get a little quiet and still. And now just take a big, steady breath in. No strain, and then just breathe out through the mouth with a ha, like a ha, with a sigh, yeah. And then again, breathe in, and this time pause a little at the top of the breath in, and then just squeeze your arms and your hands and your upper chest and your face. Just a little squeeze, squeeze it as you hold the breath. And then as you breathe out, relax the squeeze and breathe out with a sigh again. And then let's repeat that, breathing in. Sip a little extra breath in this time if you can, and hold. And now squeeze your whole lower body. So squeeze your belly, squeeze your hips, squeeze your legs, your knees, scrunch up your toes. Squeeze everything in. Try not to cramp here. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And then release. Release the muscles, release the squeezing, release the breath. And then just let everything soften and let the breath come naturally, and just notice perhaps a subtle feeling of change in the muscles as you've squeezed them and released them, and contact just the natural breath coming in and out. And just rest your awareness, so rest your mind on this wave of breath coming in and going out. And it can be nice to just say to yourself, I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out, or even just in and out. Okay. Now, as you keep breathing, I want you to visualize, so feel or see or sense a channel of light energy that is moving through your whole body, from the center of your body, from your base, so the bottom of your hips and your pelvis, through to the crown of your head. Channel of light traveling from the base of your body, through the center of your body, all the way through to the crown of your head. And as you breathe in, you feel breath moving up and through this channel, all the way through the top of the head. And then as you breathe out, you're feeling breath or energy or awareness moving down from the top of the head to the base of your body. And just stay with that, just breathing in and up the channel, breathing out and down the channel. And just relax into that rhythm, staying with the image or the sense of that channel right through your center. And now, next time when you breathe out, begin to sense this channel of light extending all the way down through your body, through the floor, through the ground, and all the way through to the center of the earth, where it's tapping into a deep source of ever-ready earth energy. And then as you breathe in, you're drawing this energy upward through the earth and back into your body and through your central energy channel, so that you can receive it into your body, distributing this energy into your body to wherever it's needed right now. So breathing out, sending awareness down through the channel, down into the very center of the earth, tapping into this abundance of source energy. And as you draw this energy up in your next breath in through the body, you're feeling it come up through the body and send it to wherever it's needed, into a particular part of the body or into your mind, into a thought or a memory or an emotion. Just keep continuing, just a couple more rounds of breath where you draw the breath up and through, sending healing, transformative energy up and through the body, and then down and out, reconnecting to that source of energy that's always available to you. Know that you can always tap into this energy, this grounded quality that's found in the earth at any time where you're feeling unsteady, where you're feeling depleted, where you're feeling off center. All right, and now let go of the image and just start to come back into your body, breathing naturally. So feel your body just seated wherever you are, and become to be aware of the room and the space that you're in right now. Maybe you're noticing sounds around you. Maybe you can tap your feet on the floor and start to move or wriggle your spine, Start to roll your shoulders, roll your head, and maybe taking a lovely big spontaneous breath in and out. Open your eyes when you're ready. Righty, here we are. If you like that, let me know. And know that you can tap into that image or just the feeling at any time throughout today's practice or today's webinar, and at any time that you need it, if that felt helpful for you. But we're going to begin now with the content. Start with compassion fatigue. So compassion fatigue can be considered a special case of burnout. So let's just consider that anyone can experience burnout. So anyone in any profession or in any role. So, if you're working at any job, you can experience burnout, or a parent can experience burnout, a student or even children can experience burnout. But compassion fatigue happens when there's burnout as well as vicarious trauma. So I'm going to spell out what the difference is between these two shortly, but it's an accumulative effect of helping many people in extreme or challenging circumstances, and it results in this sense of loss of energy, loss of idealism, a sense of loss of purpose experienced by people in the helping profession. So the compassion fatigue is a special case of burnout that happens for people who are helping other people. And the effects can be broad reaching, so across physical, mental, emotional, relational, sexual, and spiritual realms of living. And more importantly, or most importantly, or for organizations, I suppose, it can really result in a change in attitude of behavior towards work and working. So people can feel a little bit dispirited or cynical or less invested in work, and that can result in things like absenteeism, not wanting to be at work, and even leaving, the area of work completely, or retiring early. And it can also result in, a more overinvestment or obsessive behavior around work as well. And there are lots and lots of contributing factors, which I'll start to talk about shortly. Okay. So here we have this beautiful image that perhaps portrays that feeling of burnout, which Freudenberger describes as a depletion or an exhaustion of a person's mental and physical resources attributed to his or her prolonged yet unsuccessful striving towards unrealistic expectations, internally or externally derived. So there's some key words here, there's a sense of depletion that is across the board, mentally and physically, and this sort of striving towards unrealistic expectations. And I'm just wondering how you're all receiving that, very relatable, I think. So it talks about, or it's about this overworking, this overdoing, and this attitude of pushing beyond what is healthy or possible. So there are these feelings of being exhausted and worn out and losing energy, and that's across emotionally exhausted, mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, and sleep doesn't help. So a good night's rest doesn't change that. You wake up feeling like this as well. And I really love Dina Gluberman's little statement here that burnout happens when the meaning goes out of what we're doing, but we're too invested to notice. So that's that kind of unconscious striving. We're just pushing and pushing and pushing, and we've just forgotten why we're pushing so hard. And along with this sort of physical, mental exhaustion, there are these emotional changes that we may be observing as well, from frustration and anger through to depression and unhappiness and hopelessness, or even just feeling nothing. And it's more this quality of joylessness, I think. It's just like, whatever. I've lost passion, I've lost the joy. And this joylessness can contribute to this increase in kind of addictive type behaviors, such as, or anything in terms of anything that we do that we try and bring some of that joy back. We think it'll bring some of that joy back. So it may be addictive or excessive shopping, or overuse or abuse of substances, including coffee or alcohol or marijuana or MDMA, or even binging on TV or socials or food or sugar. So I think when we do these things, or when we find ourselves doing these things, not that doing these things are terrible things to do, but if they're if we're doing them because we've kind of lost a sense of joy or passion in our life, and we're just looking for a bit of a hit, that could be a real cue. We might also see that you're starting to withdraw from people, that you're pulling away from friends or family or colleagues at work, and not just physically pulling away, even in their presence. Perhaps there's this feeling of being disconnected or cut off from other people, or even from yourself. So this cut off from self, I know some of my clients will often say, if they're experiencing this, they feel like they've lost their soul. You know, something has gone away inside them. And it's very sad. It's very saddening to have that feeling. And in spiritual traditions, there's talk about a spiritual crisis, or a dark night of the soul, which signals that something big has come or is coming to an end. So it can make us feel quite lost as well. Okay. So aside from these emotional and mental changes and behavioral changes, there can be physical issues as well that come with burnout. And some of these are things like chronic fatigue and IBS and hormonal changes that, you know, not always detectable with tests, but they can be felt. You know, something is off physically. I know that when I felt burnt out, and I've gone to my GP and gone, oh my gosh, I just feel wiped out, you know, check my bloods, make sure there's nothing going on, and she'll go, your bloods are fine. So it might not always come up. So this can be sometimes real subtle physical changes as well, but they can also be pretty intense too. This other feeling that I'm just not doing my job very well. I feel like I suck at my job right now, and can be something that can, I suppose it's part of that disconnection from the work and just feeling like you're not really contributing. So burnout isn't an all or nothing thing though. So it doesn't always have to be annihilating. So, and this is key here as well, because let's consider that there will be moments in your life that you're going to feel like this. It's natural and necessary, perhaps, that there are going to be these fluctuations in energy as things change in your life, and you learn to tweak and adjust things as things change. But as long as you're awake and aware to the signals that something is out of whack and something's not right, it's an opportunity to make conscious adjustments to how you live and work and relate. Okay, so awareness of what burnout is and what to look out for is really important. Okay, so let's just take a moment before we move on to vicarious trauma. I want to just take another breath. If everyone can just take another breath in and out. I mean, this is as much for me as for everybody, but it's just that moment of checking in. And I just want you to just notice what's happening inside you. Maybe just notice what's happening in your body. Maybe there's a physical sensation somewhere in your body, or there's some sort of emotional response, or you're having a thought. So all I want you to do is just notice that. Yeah, just note it, become aware of it. You don't have to solve anything about it, but just be curious to whatever's rising in you in this moment as we're going through this material. And take a breath and maybe connect to that source energy if you're feeling like you're a little bit uncentered. All right. And now we're going to move on to vicarious trauma. So vicarious trauma occurs when there is a transformation of a trauma worker's inner experience resulting from the empathetic engagement with their client's trauma material. Now, this, I just want to say, most of the research around vicarious trauma does actually come from looking at people working in therapy with other trauma survivors, but it can be applied to anybody that actually comes into contact with people who are traumatized. So you don't have to be a therapist to work through some of this stuff as well. So that's really important. So there are lots of people that work with trauma and work with traumatized people who aren't therapists. And just because you're exposed to trauma doesn't mean that you will develop vicarious trauma. So just by working with traumatized and vulnerable clients and hearing their stories, it means you will be exposed vicariously to trauma or have this secondary exposure to trauma. But what may turn it into vicarious trauma versus just vicarious exposure is the cumulative effect of this work on how you feel. So, and this is through the empathetic engagement. It's sort of like when we are present with our clients and we have that empathetic connection with our clients, but all of a sudden we're really starting to be affected by it over time. We may start to question, am I having a vicarious trauma experience? So this cumulative effect can happen on our emotions, on our memories, on our sense of self, on the way that we view the world and view ourselves, so our schemas, and our sense of safety as well, you know, how safe we feel in the world. So some of the things that can be seen in someone who might be experiencing vicarious trauma are very similar to PTSD, although it's not PTSD. So some of these emotions can be very similar to burnout. So fear and anxiety and that sort of sense of despair and loss of energy. But in addition to that, there may be issues with sleep or nightmares, and the sleep and nightmares might be related to some intrusive images or intrusive thoughts that might be related to the trauma material that you're being exposed to over and over again. And this may be specific trauma material, so you might start to imagine or sense or feel you know, very specific stories. You might have heard a story and you start to reimagine that same story over and over again, or it might be more general, you know. So if you work with clients of domestic violence, you know, a lot of women in domestic violence situations, you might start to experience images or nightmares or thoughts just broadly related to being attacked or being harmed in that kind of, in a similar sort of way. And what can happen as a result of that is that your behavior changes, or your attitude towards life or people changes, and your beliefs even change, where you start to perhaps develop a greater sense of mistrust in the world or a mistrust in others. And this can result in even avoiding situations that you didn't avoid before, or doing things to protect yourself in a way that you haven't done before. So it's almost like an overcompensation for some of the material that you're hearing. So this is where it sort of really makes you feel unsafe. I don't feel safe in the world anymore, and I have to do all these things to protect myself. And the boundaries between work and personal life get a little leaky. So you might be noticing that you're thinking more about your clients or their stories when you're not at work. Okay, so I'm just taking a sip something here. So like I said, just by working with traumatized clients doesn't mean that you will experience vicarious trauma, but you can be at higher risk if you work more, if the majority of your work is with trauma survivors, say. And if you have a history of post-traumatic stress or depression as well. So, and this means that vicarious trauma is exacerbated or contributed to by countertransference. Countertransference being, you know, your own personal issues, perhaps unconscious personal issues. You may not even be aware of what's going on, coming into the relationships that you have with your clients. And then I'm just going to flag here about empath or highly sensitive people. That, you know, if you identify with being highly sensitive or highly empathetic, where you are highly attuned to other people's experiences, where you really feel like you know what's going on with other people and you feel it strongly, you may actually have the experience of be more vulnerable to vicarious trauma as well. Okay. I'm hoping everyone's keeping up with me. Now, just a little word on empathy. So empathy is, it speaks about capacity to sense and feel and experience another person just by being with them. And it's necessary. It's really necessary part of working with vulnerable people to have empathy. It's also imperative for our survival. So empathy is something that we've developed to really enhance our survival as human beings, because it means that we can build trust and feel safe and connected to others. So we don't want to not have empathy when we're dealing with our clients, but it does put us at risk of experiencing vicarious trauma. So there's a bit of a dance, you know, about how can we stay empathetically attuned to our clients without becoming traumatized by what they're bringing to us in terms of their stories and how they need us as well. So it can be a problem, I suppose, this idea of empathetic strain. It's when I'm feeling too much, or that feeling of I'm feeling like I'm being invaded or infected by my client's trauma material, is when we might need to start to look at, well, how am I empathetically engaging with my clients? And I'm going to talk about this later, so I'm not going to leave you all hanging with this. I just want to put it out there that, you know, when our response to feeling that empathetic strain might be either to pull back or block or withdraw from working with our clients, and this may not be really obvious. It might just be an attitude or a felt experience where we're just detaching emotionally, or we're intellectualizing about what's going on with our clients, or we might even become hostile or deny our clients' experience. Or the other end, when we're feeling that empathetic strain, is that we over-identify. So we can start to really move in a little closer and start to work too hard to rescue our clients. And so enmeshment and codependency can be a thing that might happen there. So, and just overall, I just want to kind of fly through this part a little, not because it's not important, it's actually really, really important. We've got to understand that when we're having these experiences, we're not having them just within ourselves, we're having them within a system and a culture that may be contributing to or amplifying our experiences of burnout, vicarious trauma, or compassion fatigue. So a cultural anthropologist or a social psychologist would be able to speak a little more about this, but I just want to flag some important points here that, you know, if you feel like you don't have enough skill or qualified enough to work with some of the people or do some of the work that you're doing, this can actually have an impact. If your workload is excessive or expectations for how much work you can do are unrealistic, and this is from outside, you know, those external expectations. If, like I said, most of your work is with vulnerable people, you're more at risk. And if there is a sense that I don't have any power to choose who I work with or how I'm working, that can also place it at risk and lead to a sense of hopelessness. Bureaucracy, you know, the things that we have to do the things for our people might feel really, really frustrating and really create a sense of powerlessness as well. And so other things like understaffing, underfunding inexperienced people, and inadequate supervision and training. So busy workplaces, underfunded workplaces, or highly demanding workplaces might not have the time to make sure that everybody is up to speed in terms of being supported and skilled up. If there is a highly stressful workplace, maybe there is conflict or bullying or issues between colleagues that can exacerbate these feelings of having difficulty with your clients or at work. And then there's this culture, a workplace culture that might encourage, you know, being tough or just getting through it, and discourages openness and honesty and vulnerability. That, you know, I'm actually having a tough time here and I need some support. So that might feel like a difficult kind of conversation for some people to have in workplaces that, you know, really discourage that. As a therapist, and probably some of you as well who need to keep client material confidential, it can feel isolating that, you know, you can't really discuss what's going on for you with your clients. You can't talk about their story so much. So that can make you feel a little alone in what you do. So this is why supervision and training is really important. And then, of course, you know, we're all working within a system that, you know, is embedded with inequality and power imbalance. So there are also cultural rules and expectations, often unspoken, often unconscious, about how things should be and how you're supposed to do things. And sometimes, and I think we're realizing this more and more, right, that this system isn't really working and it's not going to work long term. And but, you know, it's quite entrenched. So, you know, if we can gradually start to kind of disassemble some of those systems, I think, you know, in a couple of 100 years time, we might not have these issues. But I've got the poll, and I think Carly's going to put the poll up for all of you. If oh, I've just got a little, okay, I'm just getting little pop-ups there. So while you're doing the poll, if you want to take another moment just to check in with yourself as well. So maybe just take a moment to pull back and notice your breath, and notice what's happening in your body. Notice if there are any emotions that are moving through you right now that you can name. Notice any particular thoughts or quality of your thoughts. Even maybe the feeling of energy in your body, just becoming aware of what's happening inside, you know. Alrighty, and curious to see how you all did here. I probably should have summarized a little bit. I might do that now, even though most of you have probably responded. You know, remember, burning out or burnout is more about that loss of energy due to striving. Vicarious trauma can really look similar to burnout, but it's got that added effect of kind of really experiencing or taking in some of the trauma material, having that affect how you live your life and think and feel. Compassion fatigue being a combination of those two. So let us know, based on what I've been talking about today, whether you've ever experienced any of that, or if you're experiencing that right now.
Thanks, Mandy. We've got about 70% of people who have popped their responses in, so I might just give you another 5 seconds, pop in your response, and share the poll.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just sharing that now, and hopefully you can see that on your screen. So around 73% of people said yes to experiencing burnout. The next one was compassion fatigue at about 64%.
64.
Yeah, vicarious trauma around 44%, and 5% equally for no and not sure. So
not sure. Wow. I mean, to me, that's not surprising. But look at that, everybody, right? So this is a big deal. And for those people who said no and not sure, or not sure in particular, that no is fantastic. You know, I will be saying to those people that say no, I'll be like saying, you know, what's your medicine? And can you share that medicine with the people that you work with? That's something that I'll talk about a little later in terms of, you know, sharing our stories and supervision, because it's really important that if you've got a way that you're dealing with or handling work, people want to know how you do that. So, and the people that are not sure, maybe just putting into the chat, you know, what's unclear, did I, you know, more examples, you know, and that'll help me as well. So I want to make sure that if people aren't sure, they've got enough information, you know, to work out, you know, where they might be at. But thank you everybody for that. So this is an important topic for sure. I'm going to move on now. Hang on, I'm in the right place. So I am not going to spend a hell of a lot of time on this, primarily because I've talked about it in other webinars, and I'm not presuming that everybody has listened to my other webinars, but I'm going to direct you to those other ones that I think are probably still up, that you can sort of see the recordings of those. So I'm just going to skim over it, but it's so important as well. So we you know, it's really important that we practice, the practice of becoming aware is really vital to, or a prerequisite even, to changing how we respond to our experiences, so that we can consciously do the work to change our circumstances that aren't working. And that's to change our circumstances that are within our control. So becoming aware or self-aware is really understanding what's going on in your nervous system, including your body, your mind, your energy, and your behavior. And it's also about committing to building the resources for nervous system regulation that really helps you become aware and shift and change your state, change your responses, and change your energy as well. So like I've kind of been doing a little bit today already, this is about building your skills to notice and name your inner experience. So noticing and naming what's happening in your body, starting to notice and become aware of the sort of thoughts that you're having, noticing and naming the emotions that you're experiencing, and the quality of energy that's moving through your body. And when you do this, when you can kind of go, oh, this is what's happening right now, and I know what to do with that, it can really help us build a sense of agency. And when we feel like we're a little bit more in charge and a little bit more grounded within our own being, it can have the capacity through empathy, through the empathetic engagement with our clients, to also calm our clients or our colleagues or the people that we're working with. So your nervous system that's balanced and connected and calm and open can also positively affect those people around you. And you're higher risk of compassion fatigue when you're not quite in tune with what's going on in your body and mind. And this can happen because you're either misreading the cues of what's happening, or you're ignoring the cues of distress or discomfort that's happening. And then maybe not knowing how to do about that, what to do about that, of course. And then maybe over focusing on what's happening with the people that you're working with at the expense of yourself. Okay. Now, I was going to do a little micro check-in practice here, but I think I'll not do that right at this point in time, because I think we've got a lot more material to go on, but we have been doing a little bit of that already. Okay, so that's just a little bit, and I'm not going to talk about the window of tolerance here because I've talked about it in other webinars, and I'm just going to send you over to those, or I've also got a blog that I've written as well in the link in the resources section at the back as well. Now, I feel like, Carly, I'm running out of so much time already, so I'm going to just skip over this little vagal break exercise and come back to it if we've got time at the very end. I want to talk about here this self-care plan. So self-care is not just an individual selfish thing. It is important for an important concern for organizations, and the community as well. So we want to start to frame self-care as this is good for me and it's good for everybody as well. So this is about making time to meet your needs and develop an attitude of taking your own needs and longings seriously. So as we're talking about this just now, I want you to look out for any excuses or resistance you might have to kind of taking some of the time to meet your needs. And these are just some little questions or inquiry questions that you can start to ask yourself as you develop a self-care plan. So, you know, how do I treat my body? Am I eating well? Am I resting well? Do I make time for movement and physical activity and exercise? Am I making time just to do things for the pure pleasure of it? So doing things where I don't have a sense of obligation and duty. Am I meeting my needs for connection with family and friends and community? And this is a really interesting one. Am I feeling creatively satisfied? Am I doing things that feel creative and new? Are there personal projects or dreams or ideas that I keep putting off for later or not yet? And of course, am I accessing the support that I need? So this is both personal in terms of maybe your physical and mental health and well-being. Am I going to the doctor? Am I going to see a therapist if I need to see a therapist? But also professional as well. You know, within my realm of work, am I getting the sort of support that I need so that I keep doing my work in a way that feels like I'm contributing and I feel like I can do it? All right, so part of a self-care plan, I think this can be really helpful, this little ritual for leaving work. So it creates a little boundary between work and home. So taking 5 to 15 minutes to consciously close off at the end of every day can be really, really important. So this is pragmatic closing off, turning off the computers, tidying up your workspace, you know, putting on your out of office email, perhaps turning off your phone. But it can also be other things like making sure as soon as you get home from work, you shower and you change out of work clothes. Now, those of you who are working at home, if you're not already getting changed into work clothes to go to work, I would start to do that, or I recommend that, because it can be really symbolically at least helpful to go, I'm at work now and now I'm not at work, and using clothing as a symbol of the workday finishing. But then of course there's these beautiful physical kind of practices like walking and riding and swimming or dancing, spending time in nature. Now these might sound really basic, but I want you to all really think about, you know, what am I actually going to do at the end of each day to signal to my, not just to my body, to my mind, to my soul, that actually I'm putting this away for the moment. I like to do things like, you know, maybe light a candle. One of my favorite things is to dong a Tibetan bell. It's like dong, it's done, you know, like the end of a meditation practice. And if I've had a day of clients, I will actually mentally contact each of those clients, you know, by name them and say thank you, and we are done, you know, thank you and we're done, and I'll see you next time. So we're kind of saying goodbye to all the people that I've been working with. If I can't do it there, I do it mentally, so I've turned off that way. And of course, you know, trying not to kind of keep work emails open and keep contacting colleagues outside of work hours as well, and making that a bit of a discipline. This is a nice little visual practice, or you know, if you're more visual, sort of working out, you know, how do I spend my time and direct my energy? You know, and for a lot of people when they do this practice, you know, the work part may actually take up, I don't know, most of that little pie, and everything else is squished into the rest, if it exists at all. So if you want to work with, even doing this with a colleague can be really nice to go, actually, how do I spend my time, and where is the imbalance, and what are the things that I need to do to adjust so that I've got, you know, my needs are being met in other areas of my life as well. Okay, let's take another breath. I need to take another drink of water, and Notice what's happening inside. Notice what feels like it's hitting for you. Okay, notice if there are any emotions and thoughts, and just note those as well. Now, as we start to notice and name what's going on, we might start to notice that we're actually telling ourselves stories that actually keep the suffering going. So this is the question, is what is driving my striving? What is keeping this fire going to and burning out of control? So this is where you become aware of your unhelpful beliefs and attitudes that are operating in the background. So these are, what are my beliefs around work? What are my beliefs around giving and receiving, success and failure, discipline, how to express emotions, my sense of self and self-worth? And within my practice, a lot of these beliefs can really be about this tendency towards self-sacrifice or perfectionism, competition, and unrelenting standards. To succeed, I have to be perfect, or I have to work hard, otherwise I'll fail, or it's important that I give everything that I've got. These sorts of thoughts. Also about approval seeking or people pleasing. It's important, other people's opinions of me matter. It's important that I don't disappoint people, and an attitude of judgment and criticism, not necessarily about others, but maybe to self. So this is quite a punitive attitude, or an attitude of mistrust. I don't trust people to be there for me, so I just, I'm the only one that I can rely on. So I'm not going to ask for help because I don't get it. And I'm saying this stuff because I can be guilty of this sort of stuff as well, particularly self-sacrifice, self-reliance, and perfectionism. So I know these things are operating in the background, and I have to actively work on these consistently. So some of this dismantling your conditioning, so these learned beliefs and thoughts and strategies, can be the work of a lifetime. I feel like it's ongoing work for me, and I'm just sort of pulling it apart bit by bit. So this is something just to pay attention to in an ongoing way. So a little practice you can do is, what are my shoulds and oughts and musts and have tos, and how attached am I to these things? And can I start to take small conscious risks that challenge these rules? So these are rules that you're living by that may not necessarily be very useful, and in fact can be quite harmful, especially if it's driving or striving, or it's sort of contributing to either pulling back from clients when they need you, or sort of over investing in them as well. So if there's anything unresolved within your history that is contributing to keeping some of this suffering going in terms of compassion, fatigue, burnout, vicarious trauma, start to be willing to look at this really, really gently and slowly if you haven't already done so. And this is about learning to listen more to inner guidance and an inner knowing and an intuition, rather than being driven by societal or culturally approved ideas about how you have to be. So I really like Dr. Estez's phrasing here. She says, misbehave, but with integrity. So break the rules, but know what's important, and know that you're kind of doing something that's not, heinous or terrible just by breaking a rule about perfectionism. Okay. And this idea of contacting your values or your bigger than self goals can really help you start to dismantle this conditioning. So this is where you're contacting, an attitude about how to be rather than how you think you should be. So this is, again, it's that kind of contacting deeper self or soul or inner guidance versus your conditioning. And it requires that you listen to something that might be a little quieter inside you, which is your intuition, your imagination, a sense of what soul wants. And it's also creative. And it's not that we do away with our analytical and logical mind, but we kind of use that kind of intuitive and creative thinking to guide where we want to go. And then we bring in all of that lovely logic and analytic thinking to help us work out how to do that. Okay. And so these are just some questions that can help you contact some of those bigger than self goals. So how do I want to represent myself in this area of work? What really matters to me when I'm with my clients? What makes me feel alive and energized and inspired? So that striving or that motivation comes from the sense of aliveness, not from, you know, fear of failure or people pleasing. Okay. What kind of positive impact do I want to have on my work with my clients? So you might be automatically coming up with some words and phrases, and that's wonderful, but sometimes we might need to sit with this for a little bit. And I really like this idea of, you know, role redesign. Not that you're going to say, hey, this is what I want my job to be now, but it might be within my role. How could I rewrite my job description, from a bigger than self perspective, right? How would that look? So that might be a nice little exercise to do in a group supervision meeting, or even if you're a journaler, you can start to do that. You know, what would the people that I work with, or what would I want the people that I work with to say about how my role helps them? And that can help you connect to a sense of why I do my work. It can help you start to go, well, if that's how I want them to see me, I wonder how my behavior might change, or how my attitude might change to be able to do that. And so starting to go, well, I could do a little bit of that right now. I could just start to change my behavior a little bit by doing this one little thing every day, by connecting to this person in a different way every day. So, you know, you can't change a problem with the same mind that created it. You can't, you can only attract or create a different experience by changing your attitude or your energy or your behavior first. Okay, so this requires doing things from a different place. And here are just some words of inspiration that might help you connect to some of those bigger than self goals. Okay, and this is the home stretch, and I know I'm hitting right up on time here. Hopefully I haven't lost too many people, but vicarious resilience is this idea that it's because of the stressful and traumatic event, there's been growth, okay, within your clients. And when you can connect to that, so just like vicarious trauma can mean that you're actually feeling the horrible experiences that happen to your clients, vicarious resilience means that you can also contact their growth. And this means that by empathetically engaging with your clients, you can feel that sense of inner strength, you can have compassion, maybe you get a new appreciation of life and living. And for some people, this also means connecting to a stronger sense of spirit or faith, or even changing completely the direction that their life takes them. So you can be inspired by your clients' resilience and recovery, and you can use that. So we don't need to be afraid that if I contact and remain empathetically attuned and engaged with my clients, I'm just going to be infected by them. I can actually get something that it really inspires me as well. So you can find hope and meaning in your clients' experiences and stories as well, and they can impact you as well. I know that when I'm working with my clients, you know, if they're, you know, I encourage them, you know, if they're having a good week, not to cancel a session, but to come to the session and talk about what's working for them, because that really helps me too. You know, I really can be with them, in that experience of success or joy or renewed strength that comes from doing something differently or having a good experience. So like I said, this requires being genuinely empathetic with your clients. I've linked Roshi Joan Halifax's TED Talk at the end of this webinar as well. She talks about this strong back and soft front. And I know for fans of Brené Brown, she quotes Roshi Joan Halifax as well with this. So this is about being open and willing to feel your client's distress and imagine yourself in their experience. So you're actually touched by their suffering, but you're remaining objective. Okay, so you're still engaged, but you're open, but there's an objective stance here, and you're not a passive observer as well. It's not like you're blocking off and not feeling everything. You're feeling it, but you're able to stand back from it. So that's that strong back. So Roshi Joan Halifax talks about empathy being compassion and strength together. So, you know, if you cut off from or numb the feelings, you also cut off from the positive. So if you cut off from the negative, you're cutting off from the positive. So this is a sense that I'm allowing the feelings of grief or loss or hurt to move through me. So that's that soft front. But at the same time, I'm able to stand strong within myself and be very grounded and centered and know that this is not me as well. All right. I suppose on the opposite side, if there's that sense of I'm over identifying with my clients' stories, I feel too much, you don't have to be helpless to resist that. Okay, so you can, this is where boundaries work, you know, that other webinar that I did can really be helpful, where you can sort of practice by titrating in, so moving in, but then pulling back physically. So not disengaging, but just going, I might need to make a little bit of physical or energetic space here, but I want to pull back just enough so that I can still feel what's going on without feeling like I'm being enveloped in it. So that's that, maybe that sort of grounding, centering practice that we did right at the beginning could be something helpful here, where you go, I'm developing a strong back. So if you have a tendency to pull back from your clients when you're feeling that empathetic strain, it's that, well, I can still be strong here and feel. So there's that sense of opening and softening. And if you have a tendency to kind of become enmeshed or go all in with your clients, developing that strength, that might be something that can be a little goal to work on. But just some other things that you might want to do is, as you're working with this, is maybe just temporarily or permanently switch roles or populations while you're returning to some balance, or just start to expand your role to include other things, tasks and responsibilities. And lastly, just sharing your experience. Like, so those people who feel like, actually, I've got a really amazing story to tell about one of my clients and it really affected me. If you can share stories where you have felt changed in a positive way by your clients, and you share that, that can actually help you to share those stories, and it can help the people that you're working with, your colleagues as well. And even sharing your sense of how you've been changed with your client. You know, I think that can be so empowering, and it really enhances that empathetic engagement. So this is about that restorative narrative, you know, so retelling the stories, and it's not a story of positivity, because sometimes your client situations are still pretty tough, but it's like, even though the situation is really challenging, I actually can see that there's been a lot of strength and growth and change that's happened within my client and within myself because of that. Okay, so all right, here's that phoenix rising from the ashes, and this is Dina Glitterburn again. She goes, when we burn out, it's our old personality that burns itself out, then our soul fire begins to light our way and bring us joy. So that's kind of that sense that actually what's happening right now is signaling to me that something is not working. And rather than just kind of rest it out or go on holidays and then come back and do the same thing, it's a real opportunity for me to go, hang on, what am I doing here? What's actually contributing to this situation? What can I have power over to change? You know, do I need to develop more self-awareness? Do I need to develop a self-care plan or return to one? What sort of belief system am I carrying that's really driving me in a way that's unhelpful? Are my boundaries unclear so that I can't really stay in empathy with my clients, so that I'm either feeling too much or blocking off? So what am I doing that can contribute? What am I doing that's contributing, and how can I change that? It can really help us feel empowered and enhance our own personal growth and transformation. All right, so little take home. I've given you a lot. and know that change is hard. So you don't have to do everything all at once. So if there's any perfectionism there or overwhelm, you know, just recognize that you just need to maybe just make a little tweak or just begin, and you do that consistently. And then you add something else, and then you add something else. Okay. So I love this image of the labyrinth. You know, if any of you have walked the labyrinth, you know, you begin somewhere and you think you're getting somewhere, and then all of a sudden you're backtracking and you're at the beginning, or it feels like you are, and you kind of go around and you don't know where you're going. So it can sometimes feel like that doing this work. So really checking in with yourself consistently is going to help. You know, it's like, where am I now? Because, you know, as you move through the labyrinth, you're making progress. It might not always feel like you are, but you are. So checking in with yourself or checking in with your colleagues, sharing, you know, what's working for you, discussing what's not working for you can be really helpful to kind of just make sure that, things are happening. You know, I am making some progress. So I've just summarized here just everything that we've talked about today. So doing regular check-ins, making sure that you start to develop a self-care plan and work out what's essential or not. Practice noticing and naming. Really work on developing regulation techniques and add new ones as you become feel proficient at another one. Start a leaving work ritual and be willing to adapt and tweak it until it feels really good for you. Starting to become aware of unconscious beliefs and start to really take the risk of dismantling them, and identify values bigger than self principles. This is a big one for me. Advocate for regular peer supervision, mindfulness check-ins, so that you can share stories of vicarious resilience and strength, and how to apply these bigger than self ideas. And just start tweaking that pie, you know, in terms of, you know, making sure that the energy is balanced across all aspects of your life, and just make one conscious change this week based off your bigger than self ideas here. Okay, and there's some resources there and those links that I spoke about. Oh, all right, we're done. And I've gone over again. I'm so naughty. Carly, thank you.
That's okay. No problems. There's so much great content to cover in this area, I think. So we have still most of our audience sticking with us. So thank you for hanging around. There have been a few questions that have come through. I might sort of combine a couple that have similar themes, if that's okay. So a couple of questions have come through around, I guess, where you draw the line from where you've just got, you know, small things that need to be done to get you back on track versus needing to either take a long-term break from your workplace perhaps, or even leaving a job completely. So, you know, recognizing, I guess, at what point on the continuum you are and how you could respond in a workplace setting to take care of yourself or get you out of that situation.
Oh my God.
Be difficult.
Yeah, that is such a big question, and it's a question I suppose it's one of the bigger things that I ask. You know, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? You know, and I think I suppose from my own I'm going to speak directly to my own experience. It's, you know, I suppose a couple of years ago, I was actually thinking myself, you know, am I meant to be doing this stuff at all? It just feels like too much sometimes, and so I suppose I was willing to kind of experiment. So it might be, okay, so what if I make these small changes, you know, to how I'm working with my clients? Does that change my sense of energy or passion or joy that I have when I'm working with my clients? And I suppose if you have a choice about perhaps working a little bit less, or like I said, changing your role a little bit, I would be tweaking things a little bit to see what works. Contacting, you know, what is it that it's important about my job, and seeing if you can do more of that. If that's possible, can be helpful. And if it's not possible within your workplace, then that might be a big signal for you. Does that make sense? So if it's possible to kind of go, actually, what I really want to do more, I don't know, teaching, for instance, But that's not possible in your role. It may be, well, what if I try outside of my role to do some teaching and experiment, if that's something that I really want to do more of, or if I work less, or if I work with a different population. Yeah, does that help? I'm hoping it helps. What I did for me was I drastically reduced the number of clients I would see each week. And that's made a huge difference, because not only has it meant that I'm not seeing 7 to 8 clients every day, which is, looking back on that time, feels like madness. It means that I'm also able to do other things, not just personally, but professionally. I'm able to grow professionally. I'm able to do these webinars, which I probably wouldn't have been able to do had I been working the way that I've been working. I'm writing a little bit more. I'm running more groups, and doing all of those things together means that, you know what, I'm happy to stay where I am and do what I'm going to do. And it's a constantly evolving thing. Perhaps I'm a little blessed because I run my own practice and I can do things the way that I want, but I'm still subject to those cultural rules that says I'm supposed to be working 8 hours a day and I'm supposed to be a bit productive, right? So it's been willing to go, you know what, I can only work. I have to really listen to what my body and mind and soul is saying, and be guided by that. There's no point hearing it and then going, oh, you know what, I'll just keep doing what I'm going to keep doing. I'll keep doing things the way I've always done them. Okay, does that help those people that ask those questions? Does that help them?
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. I think that's, it's really, I'm hearing that it's really about being able to recognize in yourself what your capacity is as well. But I think in our sector, it can be difficult to balance when there is an unrelenting sort of stream of clients coming through the door, and perhaps less control over your own work and workplace situation. But yeah, I think it's good to consider that, and perhaps the people that have asked these questions can take that away and reflect on this presentation today, and think about what they can, the small things they can do to change their own circumstances.
Yeah, so those are those systemic factors that I spoke about, and I think we can start to shake that up a little bit, and that might be something that can be helpful. It's like, how can I, if that unrelenting kind of caseload is a thing, how can I creatively connect to this problem and shake that up a little bit? I mean, we've seen people do that, and this is that vicarious resilience, people like Grace Tame and Rosie Batty going, hang on, the system sucks, and this is not okay. And so they're using, all that pain and that hurt to actually make a big change. And I'm not saying that that's what you all have to do, but it's possible to kind of see a really major problem systemically and going, we have to, how are we going to address this in a creative way?
Yeah. And certainly in the community legal space, there is sometimes opportunity to do what we would call strategic pace work, or law reform kind of work, to respond to some of those systemic issues that are impacting many clients. And then that hopefully in time would have an impact on the flow through of clients that are seeing you about those kinds of issues day in, day out. So yeah, I think there's some things that can be done, but certainly a lot to reflect on today, and I'm conscious of the time and taking up too much more of Mandy's time as well. So I might close off the webinar for now and say thank you so much to Mandy for presenting to us again today, and I hope that there's some really good takeaways for those who have listened to the session. And certainly we'll be continuing to build on this webinar topic in a more broad sense around wellbeing for people in our sector. And hopefully we'll be able to touch base with Mandy again in a future session. But for now, I will just remind you to please complete the feedback survey that will pop up on your screen once the webinar is closed off. And that really helps us to make sure we're hitting the mark in terms of the sessions and the content that we're delivering through our webinar series. And thank you so much again for your participation in the polls and your great questions. And thank you, Mandy. So hope everyone has a lovely rest of the day, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, everybody. Okay. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. See you later.
Bye-bye.